coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 783. Richard's joining me, and we've got lots to talk about. We talk about Google going home. What does that mean for your smart home when devices go offline because of a service provider in the cloud? Where does that leave you with your smart home devices? Not so smart then. We'll also be talking about Windows Insider Preview builds, 20277 and 21277. And 279 as well, actually. We've got a few builds. And we're back on ARIS pre-release, which is good news because that brings us new features like ARM X64 support on Windows on ARM. We're talking about that as well. Plus lots more, so let's get straight over to Richard. So, Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Ian.
Well, actually, say good afternoon. We're with it being Christmas and everything coming up, holidays and everything, we're recording a bit earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually
which means there'll be, and there'll be breaking news sort of 30 seconds after we finish recording, probably.
Definitely. Yes, because Microsoft will just be waking up and they'll say, "Oh, let's do another build, shall we?"
Yeah, we've had a plethora of builds in the last week, which we can talk about that, including some interesting stuff as well. I wanted to get your take on the Google outage that was Monday, and what that kind of means for smart homes. And I bought a couple of purchases that I went to review. They're not quite successful as I hoped anyway, so I'll show you that as well. So where should we start? Let's start with the Google story, because a bit of a Google outage, it's doesn't really mean anything to you, does it?
It does if you've got a smart home, any kind of devices like all the Google assistants and things. Yeah, it's a bit like the AWS outage, and I think people have now realised or are realising just how connected their devices are and dependent on these services. Because so Google went down yesterday. I think it was around 11:30ish UK time. It went down, and it was only down for about an hour, I think. So it wasn't a huge amount of time. And I gather what it was, there was something to do with a storage issue on one of its authentication servers. So, which I have to say does ring a bell. I mean, we've obviously experienced a lot of authentication problems with Microsoft in the past, and Azure. So interesting that Google also suffered from an authentication issue and they had to put some more storage on the server. But of course, all those services are connected. So things like Gmail went down and YouTube went down, and all these things just simply stopped working. Although I did notice that the web search carried on working, which was good. But
because that's where they make the money.
Exactly. But what it did show up was all the people who've got devices that depend on those services, and it's not just the ones that are branded Google, but it's people suddenly find themselves unable to turn on lights or unable to do the sort of things that they would expect to be able to do in their homes, which is very similar to when AWS went down. All the portions of AWS went down, and people found their Roombas stopped working, and vacuuming all stopped, what have you. And I think it should be seen as a wake-up call to people who are buying these gadgets and gizmos. I mean, we like smart home devices here on the show. They're great fun. But be aware when you purchase these things, very often they're dependent on a service, and if that service goes down, you need to make sure you've got a backup and a way of operating independently of the internet, because one, they could go down any time, as we've seen with Google. Two, the service could suddenly change. I mean, IFTT obviously they changed the conditions of their service quite recently, and again, you may well find devices may start to behave differently depending on what's in, or they may simply just fall out of support. I mean, I think Microsoft, for its IoT devices, is it a 10-year lifespan they give now, which sounds enormous. But of course, as you've said earlier on, Ian, you've got a boiler that's blown up, that's been working for 20 years. I've got a light switch next to me here that I don't expect to change before I move out of the house. So I think people, when you're working with smart home devices, you've got to think, okay, am I going to have a kind of upgrade cycle or a start to plan for 3-4 years? I'm going to have to renew this stuff, or are you buying it as though it is an appliance? Because I think what this is showing is these things are not appliances, and they do depend on things which are outside your control. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that was one of the reluctance I had when I was getting Hive. That was one of the things that was at the back of my mind, which Hive is a great service, controls your heating and hot water, and I do make good use of it. But I was kind of worried in the back of my mind, what happens if that service doesn't work? Will I be in the cold like I am now with a broken boiler? Hopefully fixed by the time I get on the show next week. But yeah, am I going to be left with a system I can't use? And that is when you're choosing a service, you've got to be careful. And Hive is operated by British Gas, so I thought that's probably the most likely to continue. And there is a manual override where you can control it without any of the apps or services. But even so, it's a risk, isn't it? And I think if it's your front door that won't unlock or won't lock, probably even worse. You're trying to go out and you can't lock your front door.
Yeah.
It's a worry. You've got there needs to be alternatives. I mean, I've got virtual light switches in here where I am now, but there is a physical switch. That's one of the. Say I use a Philips Hue, and one of the things it does do is you can have it set so that when the power comes on, the light comes back on. So or it retains its state. So if it was off, it stays off. So you can physically control it through a physical switch. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we rely on now, and some of the stuff like greenhouse thermometer is fairly trivial, but then if you were running something a bit more professional and you were relying on that and you lost all your crops or something, that's an outage you can't afford.
I mean, well, absolutely. It's there's all kinds of smart devices that are now calling out to the internet and going back to clouds. It's a shame Gary's not online today, because I'm sure he'd have some great thoughts around this. I mean, he did mention, it must have been last year now, I think, about smart switches that were actually just physical switches, but internally, they had the smarts as well. So you always had that fallback, hardware fallback, which I think, in the light of the Google outage coming so soon after the AWS outage, surely it's going to give people a bit of pause for thought.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why some of these things like the SwitchBot system that I've got, where it actually physically turns the switch on and off, it does give you that option to manually switch it. But I guess things like security systems, I know like Arlo, the Arlo's base station I've got, you can put a USB drive into that, and then that'll capture video locally. Because if you've got a cloud outage and you get a break-in, you don't want you want to be able to access your content. But some of the other cameras, like the standalone Arlos or the Hive camera that I've got on test here, there's no option for that. So if they lose their internet, that's it. They're dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then of course, you won't get your notifications and things, because of course they'll be calling to a service that's going to try and notify you, and that's not going to work anymore because the service is gone. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so you'll be blissfully unaware of the potential break-in or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I mean, exactly. I mean, it's kind of one of the things that we worry a lot about security in this world. We worry about how secure is what protocols is it running on, what encryption is it all using. But I think we should also really think hard now about, okay, what if it just disappears? What if it's what service is this thing using, and what happens if that service goes away? And I think that's a question that I think people need to start asking the tech giants like Amazon and Google, and Apple even, when they buy their gizmos and toys, say, what happens to this hardware and that service if your cloud is not running? What's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
And I bet they'll say that comment.
Yeah, and there are a lot of alternatives. I know Gary's mentioned some that you can create I think I've forgotten the name, and Gary can correct us next week. But there was the system that we looked at, and I think we had on the show, where you can install it on a Raspberry Pi, and then there's various systems you can install on a Raspberry Pi and act as like kind of a hub, a local hub, so where it'd be cloud, so you don't have to have it cloud based. But still, when you buy something, generally, everything is cloud based now, isn't it? And comes pre. As my Alexa notifies me about motion at the front door. Yeah, so everything kind of out of the box is kind of cloud based now, and not something that you can just connect up easily yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll talk to Gary, and I'd be interested to hear what listeners think of that as well. Do you sacrifice something to get convenience and that kind of thing? But anyway, we'll see.
Exactly, but that is a really good point. Is the convenience, because it's really easy to hook these things up now. But I do worry that people may not realise exactly what they're buying and what they're hooking up with, and just how and just what they're the terms and conditions and the SLAs around the minimum service level, their agreements around it are, because these things will go down for an hour, and that could be a very expensive hour for some people.
Yeah, and even just your home broadband can drop. Nothing cloud related, just the home. And if you're dependent on that, then that's a problem. I think at the moment the way things are, especially now, I mean, if your home broadband drops out, anybody working from home and kids streaming and doing schooling from over Teams and Zoom and everything, I think it's a critical service.
It is. It is a utility now, I think, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, in the business world, we know that. I mean, in my day job, I put lines in. I'm always looking for two providers, which can be difficult. So in a lot of sites, I've got Virgin and BT OpenReach talk, so that if one goes down, the other kicks in. But it's not always possible to do that. And even businesses, I think, find it difficult to get that. And it's something actually you don't see as a home user, but I guess over time, maybe people start looking at that.
Possibly. I mean, I think certainly what I do, because I mean, I've been living in a building site now for about 9 months. Yes, it's one of those things that, yes, he's got two thumbs and thought he'd do a whole home renovation in a pandemic. This guy. So my builders have managed on more than one occasion to cut through the internet by mistake. It's happened 3 times now, but I've been able to switch to say 3G or 4G relatively easily, and then simply plug that into the router, and the network works again. So that backup is there. But I think you make a good point about having two providers, because of course one of the real challenges, and I think that's been shown with I think it was in London this year where somebody managed to basically put a digger through. It might have been at the end of last year. So somebody put a digger through a bunch of fiber, and it turns out that a number of providers were all using the same backbone, and they didn't realise. So companies thought that they had two providers, but there was still that one single point of failure, which is, again, we go back to know where your points of failure are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose 5G and things like that will change will change things as devices talk to the network, to the cloud themselves, rather than going through your home broadband. But we're not quite there yet.
I'm never having 5G. I don't want Bill Gates controlling me.
Oh, well, yeah, that's it. Once you've got the vaccine and 5G, then you'll be itching for a copy of Windows Vista on your Zoom and your Windows phone.
Exactly.
Smart stopwatch.
Exactly. I'll be talking to Microsoft Bob, not Alexa. Yeah, that's very true. And churros as well, wasn't it? Do you remember the adverts? Oh, crikey. It's flashing back now. I should at this point out 5G is not an attempt by Bill Gates to control your mind. Just to be absolutely clear, that was a joke.
Yeah, just in case, please.
Just in case. Please send your letters to ISDIX and the Digital Lifestyle.
Yeah, what other news? Just had some breaking news. I've just spotted a new blog post up from Microsoft that have just called the Year Ahead for Surface Duo, and they've announced, amongst other things, that the Surface Duo will be shipping in Canada, United Kingdom, France, and Germany at the beginning of 2021 or early 2021.
I imagine they've got a lot of leftover stock.
So they haven't said when. But they're going to announce it early 2021. So we'll be interested to see whether it's the exact same one or whether there's a hardware revision or anything. I suspect it will be the same one. I can't see why they would change it.
I would think it would. That's kind of what they promised at launch time, didn't it? That they said it would arrive early next year. So we are now almost early next year, which means, makes a lot of sense. I'm still intrigued to see what they do in the version 2 product, because I think that adds where they'll address the various shortcomings that we've all seen, and that I think will be an interesting device.
I'm still really enjoying using my Duo. I use it all the time, especially in the evenings. I tend to Reddit, Twitter, and those kind of things on the Duo, which is good. And I also find it quite good for editing blog posts and things like that on it as well. So I'm still using mine all the time. So you remember I talked about getting one of those magnetic USB-C cables?
Yeah.
So I did get one of those. I've got it on the screen now. So it looks like a normal USB-C, but then it comes apart and clips back together.
That's brilliant.
There's no polarity on it because it's circles, so it connects up. Brilliant. Would be great with the Surface because you don't have to unplug and plug in. Only one problem, which I didn't account for. is on the Duo, you've got the bumper.
Oh.
And if I place that in there, I'm not going to put it in, but you can kind of see.
Yeah.
It gets in the way of the bumper. So what the bumper needs a notch out of it to use it, and I don't really want to start hacking the bumper. I might do if I can get another bumper just in case.
I mean,
anyway,
to be fair, the Surface Duo is not alone with. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the phones on my desk here, and the Surface Duo isn't alone with having USB-C ports, which have have cases or manufactured cases that protrude around it. So
yeah,
I can't. Well, that's a great device. Wow, look at that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it works, and it supports charging and data, so it's full USB-C. So not some of them only do charging. This was $6.99 on Amazon for 2.
Yeah.
I recorded a review of it this morning before I realised my problem. So in the video, I don't mention that because I didn't realise when everything. But for something like the Note, it just plugs straight in. It does protrude a little bit, but
yeah, no, but that's so much easier, isn't it, than doing all the pain with a. That's great. I think that's actually brilliant. We have to buy one of those. I shall look forward to your video, Ian, and I might make a purchase because I mean the amount of obviously the Surface Duo is notorious for issues around that very I wouldn't say fragile, but it's very thin around that USB-C port, so it's easy to crack. That would solve so many problems on so many of my devices actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a couple of those. So I'll either modify the Duo bumper, or I might just wait and leave it. I might just not bother. But if I do get the crack on there, I'll put that in and modify the bumper. And then, so when you go in the car, you just connect it up, or you go to bed, I charge it overnight. Great idea, that. So,
great stuff.
Works fine. Right, so yeah, that's the Duo. So the Duo is coming to the UK, and it'll be interesting to see what any changes they make to that. So we'll have more on that.
Yeah. Is there any indication on the price point? Because I think when it was launched, it was very expensive, and they then slammed on some discounts quite quickly. So I'm wondering if we'll see it launch in the UK, maybe at a more reasonable price, perhaps.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. There's no details on here. At the moment, all you can do is sign up to be notified when it's available. So
right, okay.
You can. I did hear a rumor there may be a black version, that the slate grey that the earbuds come in.
Oh yeah, I mean black. Well, I mean I kind of would prefer a black version because those two big black borders around the screen.
Yeah, but the black is black on the inside anyway.
Yeah, but it's kind of black all round,
Yeah, but it would be the black back. Yeah, maybe. We shall see. So what else did we have this week? Oh yes, talking of Windows and talking of Microsoft stuff and ARM. We got a few new builds last week, and I'm really interested to get your take on some of these builds. I've got a little bit of info on them. First of all, we were on FE release, the Iron release, which many people have sort of said that this isn't going to be a desktop build, and we're testing this for future developments. But what I'm hearing from sources saying is that the Iron builds were probably for server and maybe Windows 10X, the core of Windows 10X, and none of these are destined for desktop, because the next release to Windows 10 will be another cumulative update rather than a full build.
That seems to be a theory, yeah.
Yeah. So what Microsoft did last week, they released 2 builds. We've got 20277, which is one of the FE release builds with no new features, just some fixes. And then you have the optional update, which worked very much like all the when they first released a new feature release, where you had the download and install link in Windows Update, and that then brought you on to FE pre-release, sorry, not FE RS pre-release, and 21277, which has all the features back in. So it's kind of like a skip ahead thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, although it doesn't have all the features back in yet, does it?
It has the emoji keyboard, the new keyboard, and the new emoji picker, and the new virtual clipboard.
But I don't think voice typing's in there yet, is it? There are some bits that are still coming. Yeah. I think it's, and they've also said again, they seem to be doing some A/B testing there as well. So you may not get all the things anyway. So and of course, obviously, you've got to go and choose to install this build as well. Yeah,
you have.
And once you've done it, you can't go back.
Yeah, don't go back. You're never going back. and also I think really they got to the end of the development road with the development of the FE release, which is while doing this, and then at some point, everybody, even if you're still on the FE release one, you'll get shoved back to this RS pre-release.
That's correct. Yeah, it's going to happen. I think at the early part of next year.
So what they did this week is they released another FE release, 20279, which Microsoft said they were doing this to test the rapid releasing of builds.
I think we should talk about. I think we should talk about what is in 21277 though, because there is stuff in there.
21277. Yes, definitely. I want to come back to that one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so finish off the FE release, but so that one they released yesterday.
Yes, 20279. Yeah.
Yeah. Microsoft said they were doing that because they're testing frequency of builds, or rapidly releasing a build, which I'm not quite sure why they need to do that, because they've done plenty of stuff like this before. But I wonder whether this is kind of a sign off of that FE release builds path, and that branch is complete now.
I mean, it could be, or could they be doing something a bit like the skip ahead? It's again, after a brief period of clarity, they do appear to be being quite obtuse about what they're actually doing. It's all very confusing again. So I don't know. Yeah, it could be the final hurrah for the FE release.
Yeah, and that goes off to the server build people, and they take that now, and possibly Windows 10X, and that's gone now.
So it could be that it's a bit odd, really. But as I say, I don't think we're going to get any more. I mean, I think we might get one more build before the Christmas holiday, I think, and then I suspect that'll be until next year now. Yeah,
because the one that you were alluding to there, the one interesting one is 21277.
Yes, which is the RS pre-release.
Yes.
Right?
And that, like you said, that does have some features in it, and some of the missing features are back in there as well.
That's right. Yeah. So it's always a higher build number. So now we're back to having all kinds of different build numbers. That's a higher build number. It's starting to reintroduce some of the things they pulled out in October. It's all a bit weird, isn't it? Really. And of course, it's got one major new feature as well.
Yeah, so we've discussed this many times. I wondered when it was coming, but X64 emulation for Windows 10.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say support for emoji 12.1 and 13, because I suspect more people are going to find that useful. I want to. Sorry.
What was the headline in one tech publication?
Oh, I think I'm vaguely embarrassed to say I think I might know that one. Was that the three or so people who run Windows on ARM might be glad to know that X64 Emulation is in preview. Yeah, that might be one of mine. Yes. So it's kind of finally here. It's late. It was promised back in November by Panos Panay. As usual, there was nothing from Microsoft as to where it was or why it was late. But it has turned up. So they have squeaked it in this year, but I'm not sure it's entirely stable. Obviously, this is a preview build, so keep that in mind. This is preview. It can fall over, things blow up. Don't depend it for production. Make sure you have a backup plan or a rollback plan. Obviously, those health warnings always apply with dev channel builds. But if you're running a Windows 10 on ARM, you can now, in theory, use Intel X64 applications. For example, apps that might need a bit more memory. I think Microsoft cited an Autodesk app, I think, and also perhaps maybe with a bit of a wink, said Chrome, 64-bit Chrome can also now use more memory, because obviously Chrome is notorious for eating memory, isn't it? So I wasn't quite sure if that was a gentle dig there or not. I'm sure it wasn't. But looking at the feedback, it looks like it's not entirely stable. I don't know if you saw, I think Rich Woods from Neowin noted there were quite a few emulation issues on the Surface Pro X, and also some issues had been introduced to 32-bit emulation as well, which is a shame. So it looks like it's a little bit ropey at the moment.
Yeah, it's early.
It's an early preview, exactly. It's just to say again, it's preview code. Don't install this and expect everything to work perfectly, because frankly, it won't.
Yeah, and there are some things that you should install as well. I think there's an updated C++ redistributable for ARM 64, and
that's right. There's video drivers as well.
Yeah, video drivers for. Interesting, the 3 devices mentioned there. Are there any other than those 3 devices? I don't know.
Well, I think they were. I don't know if they're supported for 64. I don't know if they're using ARM chips that can run the 64-bit emulation. But there were. I mean, when the Windows on ARM first appeared, there were quite a few devices came out around that time. I can't name any now, but I do remember them appearing. I think I even saw one. But now it seems to be those are the main ones. And obviously, Microsoft is they're very keen on the Surface Pro X. But when I say they're keen, it's their flagship ARM device, their only ARM device.
Yeah, so it's good that it's there. And like you said, it's got some work to be done, and I would imagine we'll see a few months with of this while it's in preview. And if this is my thinking on this one, is that in spring we'll get a cumulative update, which will be what's in the beta channel at the moment, that kind of thing. And then later on in the year, next year, we'll get a full build update, and maybe these will be the features that will be in the full build update, and this will be one of them. So it won't be in general release until whatever. We'll get the second half of next year when they do the update, so maybe September, October, or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
And Insiders will have it over the next year, or just under a year, to test that. Yeah,
I mean, there is it's perhaps maybe a bit galling for users who look at the Apple hardware and the Apple silicon, which appears to be, while it's also got issues, it seems to be doing a better job of handling Intel apps than Windows 10 on ARM does. I'm not quite sure. I mean, has Microsoft dropped the ball a bit here? It just seems they've had a long time to make this work, and it's still a little bit iffy.
Yeah, it's certainly been an up and down tale, hasn't it, for ARM on Windows? Since I sat in the ballroom at one of the hotels at Bellagio, I think it must have been at CES. I'm trying to think, 10 or 9 or something, 2009 or 2010. I can't remember. But I sat there and they demoed ARM running on Windows, and it would have been on Windows 7 at the time. Yeah, and it just showed the command prompt. That's as far as they got. So it shows that they've been on this journey a long while. Perhaps the RT kind of Windows RT set them back quite a bit, and then this renewed focus is a lot more pragmatic with the emulation that's going to be more useful for people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does address the issues of the Surface RT, certainly, which of course people bought those expecting to run their apps and found they couldn't. However, I don't know. I mean, it seems to have taken on. 64-bit Intel chips have been around for a while. I don't understand why this has taken quite so long to make work in Windows 10 on ARM. I know there was mutterings in the early days that it was actually almost impossible to make it work. And now it seems it has been made to work by other companies, and so Microsoft feels like they're playing a little bit of catch up here. So yeah, I'm pleased to see it arrived. I'm pleased to see that it's arrived. I'm just surprised it's taken so long, and that it still seems to be a little bit on the dodgy side.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can see it continue to improve, and maybe we'll get Jeremy Sinclair back on the show and
exactly.
Get his actual real world usage of it. It's not still thinking about next year and what devices I want to have. I still like the idea of a Surface Pro X, but with the where we are now, with me spending much more time at home than on the road, then an Intel device like the Surface laptop does the job just as well. And I think probably that would be where I would go next, is another Surface laptop if I got to get any other device.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the Surface Pro X, and certainly when I've used one, it has been very, very quick as long as you're running native apps. This is my other concern about the excitement over the Intel emulation, because really what we need, or what Microsoft needs, is for people to port their apps across to 64-bit to ARM. And I think as we observed, Apple are triggering that with some app development. Apple are basically forcing app developers to do that, which should hopefully feed into the Surface Pro X. Because as I say, when you are running native ARM apps, it flies. It's really good. Just as soon as you have to drop into emulation, you lose all the benefits, I think, that you have of having that ARM chip.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, I think we'll look at maybe in our first show of 2021, we'll sort of look at predictions for next year, and I'll try and remember to recap our previous ones. I think we got our predictions we did in the first show of last year, or this year, I should say. So I'll make sure I listen to those and see how close we were. I don't know if any of us predicted quite what this year would turn out to be, but I don't think I will see what we got on device-wise.
That'd be brilliant. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, so that'll be my bit of Christmas homework for me to do. I didn't envisage being sat at this desk all day and where I am, surrounded by devices. I've got I can't show it because it's clipped up, but I got one of those gooseneck tablet holders as well to test.
Oh, cool.
It's quite a good thing. It's very stiff. In fact, it's too stiff, so that to actually manipulate it, it's quite hard work. So getting find it, but it works with the Surface Go quite well. So I can have the Surface Go. But some would say I've got enough screens. I've got 4 in front of me at the moment. So a fifth one there would maybe going too far. I don't know. We'll see. You can never have too many screens.
Well, you may say, but I've done a screen detox, and right now I've just got the one screen, and that's it. It's great.
I don't know. I know. I usually stick with 3. I think my working day. So 3 is okay for me.
I mean, I did have 3 for a while, and then as I said, I did a detox and basically got one massive screen instead, which is working well.
Yeah, that's something I thought of maybe in the new year. Is I've got a 1080p monitor, and then I've got like the Surface laptop, and I'm thinking I should get a 4K monitor and just have a big 4K monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of going wider still, because I did have on review a Lenovo screen for a while. That was one of those big wide curved screens, and that was surprisingly good actually, as a substitute to having multiple screens, because it was easier to drag things around. Because while so Microsoft has made all kinds of improvements in what it's like to sort of go from screen to different from screen to screen with different DPIs, ultimately you are still dragging a window between different physical screens, and you can sometimes feel a bit jarred by it. Whereas, and that's nothing to do with Windows or whatever. It's more to do with it just feels odd to see one window move up, and it's just not quite right. It doesn't look quite right. Whereas if you've got a bigger screen, it's great. So, and also I'm a massive, I'm a massive flight sim fan as well. So I need that wide screen. I keep telling me I need that screen. It's like, no, I don't want it. I need it. It's essential for my well-being. Locked in my shed.
Yeah, maybe that's why. It's because I've got this here, and there's a Surface and there's a monitor there, and my gaming laptop over there. Maybe I just have one big monitor there. I've actually dug out the cupboard my old HDMI switcher because where I'm working from home, because I tend to keep things separate. So I've got my work laptop and I've got my Surface for my personal stuff, and so the HDMI switcher switches between them. So pretend which mode I'm in.
Oh well, actually, speaking of switches, I hauled out my old Onkyo AV switch. Basically takes like 4 HDMI inputs and outputs, 1 HDMI to a projector. So it's about, it must be about 14 years old now. No, not that young, 12 years old. And it's begun doing an odd thing. I don't know if you've encountered this before with HDMI, but sometimes when it's working from, say, a PlayStation 4 as a source, it doesn't always recognise the HDMI input that's coming in. You got to kind of sort of switch it on and off a few times, and then eventually goes, oh, there's input there, and then away it goes. Is that something you've seen before on with weird switches?
Yeah. In fact, my auto switcher is a bit like that. I sometimes have to press the button but not to totally disconnect and reconnect it. But I think there's some of the HDMI protocols we need to. Derek Flickinger, Dr. Flick, come back and explain this.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need.
HDMI protocols are really complicated, and they do evolve over time. So I think it was like version 1. That's probably 1.2, and then I think last time I talked to Derek, we were on 1.3. There's probably a newer spec since then. So it could be that some of the devices aren't sending out the pulse or the instruction to change over.
Yeah, I'm looking for an excuse to obviously I need to buy myself a new games console. Clearly, that's a problem. I also need to buy myself a new Switch because clearly that's a problem. And then find out, it's the cable.
it's the £4 cable.
Exactly.
We're talking about HDMI. I did some playing around. I have a Chromecast, which I very rarely use, plugged directly to my TV. And the way that I've got my AV set up is my TV is over there and my receiver's over there. So what I've done, my Xbox and my Skybox go optical into the receiver for the audio. So they've got an optical input.
Yeah.
And then HDMI up to the TV, which is all fine. But with the Chromecast, it doesn't have optical output. So the Chromecast is plugged out into the TV. That works fine. But then I have to use the TV speakers rather than my surround sound system, which I don't like. So you turn the volume up on your telly, and it's a nice TV, but the sound isn't as good as my surround sound. So what I thought is, could I use the HDMI input port on an Xbox to plug my Chromecast in? And it turns out you can. It's and this is on my list of things to document how I did it, but it's pretty simple, really. I plugged the Chromecast into the HDMI input on my Xbox One. Of course, the new Xboxes don't have HDMI input, I don't think. But, plugged it in, went into the settings and told you have to go through the TV tuner setup, or the tuner, and say you say to the Xbox you've got a satellite TV or cable box. And it spots the HDMI coming in, and then it asks you to pick your list, your guide listings for one guide. Of course, it doesn't matter with Chromecast, but I just told it, the standard UK one, so it thinks it's got the UK channels. But now, if I go onto the One Guide app on my Xbox, I see the content of the Chromecast stick, so then I can Chromecast to it, and then obviously it goes through the surround sound and through the HDMI. So it works, actually. I'm surprised it works. This was just so I could watch Doctor Who in the living room, by the way. Because BritBox has got all the Doctor Who. BritBox don't have a Windows, or they don't have an Xbox app, which they should do because everybody else does, but they don't. But they do have Chromecast support. So I Chromecasted from my Duo to the Chromecast stick, which was plugged into the Xbox and came through my TV.
Brilliant.
So I spent about an hour doing this. I explained to my wife what I'd done, and he was like, "Oh, why?"
All that for Doctor Who. So we have to understand it's Tom Baker.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted it in surround sound. Not that it was recorded in surround sound, but still, I wanted it to work, and I got it to work. So, video coming soon probably. But it was one of those things. I wanted to do it. At first, I couldn't get it to work, so I fiddled around with it and got it to work. So there you go. So they're a great solution. But if you've got a new Xbox, don't bother trying, because I'm pretty sure they don't have HDMI in anymore. They got rid of all the One Guide stuff.
Yeah, it's a games console now.
Yeah, real shame actually, but
yeah, it is a shame. I mean, I guess clearly, we date back to Media Center and Home Server and things. When the vision was it was going to be the center of the home entertainment system as opposed to being a games console. I guess they've looked back at what PlayStation, Sony did well, and what Xbox didn't do quite so well in terms of the messaging, and they've gone down the pure gaming front. Although it does look like, I think the PS5 seems to be ahead in the next gen sales at the moment. I think looking at some sources.
Yeah.
You can buy one, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, interesting to see how they do over Christmas with them, but they're in short supply.
Yeah, well, I guess their sales are now known because you can't buy one now, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't know anybody that's actually got a PS5 at the moment. Everybody knows that's either sticking with their Xbox or maybe they've got an S, picked up an S.
I guess you can tell by looking down the street and seeing which house has got lights that dim every now and again. Oh, there we go. And which has a massive box in the recycling bin. That'll be the other thing as well.
Maybe I could use one for take a couple of the fans out and use it for my temporary heating while I get my boiler replaced.
So it'd be good, yeah. I mean, as I said, I sat in my shed. I never feel cold because we've got an NVIDIA card in the PC. That's down.
What I need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I need is to get a gaming PC and with flight sim on it.
That and Cyberpunk 2077, which I gather has run into a few issues with consoles as well.
Yeah, that's right.
But it seems to be one of those classic things where people see screenshots of videos and assume that's what it will be like on their last generation console. You think, it probably won't be.
It takes me back to sort of I'm not doing that much PC gaming. I've seen my son and I've got the gaming laptop, but it takes me back to the old days of PC gaming when I was in my youth. And you would build your PC to run whatever game it was, Quake or Crisis or something, and it would just about run, and you'd just be trying to get it on that top setting, and then you just about get it, and you buy a new graphics card and you get it on the top setting, and then some other game would come out 3 months later, and not a chance. You're back in the lowest detail levels and everything, and enviously looking at new graphics cards again.
Exactly.
It's such a never-ending cycle.
Well, I think at this point we also need to just pay tribute, because isn't it the 30th anniversary of Commander Keen, ID Software's first big game?
Right. Wow.
And I'm going back a bit there, back to 1990, which was it obviously was not a wonderfully 3D first-person shooter thing. It was a full-on sort of 2D platform scroller, but it was what started it all for ID Software, who obviously went on to give us Wolfenstein and Doom.
Yeah. Doom has taught me how to do networking.
Doom that taught me how to destroy networking.
Yeah, and optimizing DOS memory management.
Yes, tinkering with the configs as well. I mean, networking is interesting because I think the first iteration of Doom wasn't it IPX SPX. It was that protocol, and I don't.
That's what I used it on.
Yeah, I mean, was there a lot you could do in terms of packet filtering? Because obviously, when unless you could obviously with TCP/IP, you could sort of shove things on those subnets. But I can't remember how much control one had over. Sure, actually physically connecting cables in a certain way to control what Doom was doing. Because when you fired that chain gun, the whole network went down.
Yeah, well, where I was at the time. There was quite a few of engineers, and what we used to do is we'd stay back and say, we're going to do a rebuild of the network tonight. And of course, what we did was all fire up Doom and play on Doom for the evening. And I remember getting those IPX drivers to load into high memory, so you don't have memory to run Doom.
Oh yeah, and making sure you obviously check your IRQ and DMA settings for your Sound Blaster and your any 1000 or any 2000, any 2000, any 2000, I think. Yeah. Happy days.
Oh yeah.
You know what? The good old days weren't the good old days. That was a nightmare making that work.
Yeah, that's what I learned a lot about IPX networking from getting that to talk to each other. But just the thrill then of being able to shoot one of your colleagues was fantastic.
It was massively exciting. Yeah. So anyway, 30 years, 1990 since Commander Keen first appeared, the side scroller. So there we go. Worth noting that as we look at look at how far things have come since.
Yeah. I found in my garage I've kept an original. I've got the Doom original box.
Oh wow!
With the four floppies. I've still got it. It's not the shareware. Obviously, it's the purchase one. You had to go and buy, but I've still got it. I can't imagine it being that rare, really. I imagine a lot of people have got it, but when PC games used to come in big boxes as well with floppies in, so it was a little floppy and a very big empty cardboard box.
Oh, cool.
Right.
I also mention one more game actually, just because it's quite close to my heart. I don't know if you've seen that. Do you remember the 7 Max games from LucasArts?
Oh yes.
Well, they obviously came back with Telltale games. 40 Telltale games disappeared. Was it a few years back, I think. But the 7 Max Save the World has been remastered and is now out. And I have to say, being a colossal fan of the dog and rabbity thing, they do look. It looks great. It looks really good. I'd recommend if you've got any interest at all in those characters, just checking out some of the previews because it's looking really, really good.
Oh, that's brilliant. I didn't really play that much. I played Monkey Island a lot on my Amiga, but I love those LucasArts games in that. So I guess when we're talking like early 90s.
Yeah, again, back in the 90s. Yeah, I mean, because they were. I mean, I think you can now play a lot of them on emulation with Scum VM, can't you? Which I think can interpret the LucasArts engine. But yeah, there was just the humour. I think it was just great.
Yeah, I spent many an hour on Monkey Island and various versions of it. Great. Well, I think I'll have to have a look at that. I do like those. It gives me an opportunity. Maybe I should fire up my Amiga emulator and get some.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, if you put yourself a Raspberry Pi 400, that is such a good emulation machine. It's it's utterly brilliant because there's something about the fact that it's self-contained in that one keyboard. Now I've seen that USB-C adapter, I'm thinking, it'd be quite handy some power. I wonder if enough power goes through that to power a Pi, because obviously, the Pi is a bit funny about power and USB-C power.
Yeah.
But there's something about the fact it's a self-contained keyboard, even though it's the same basic hardware as a Pi 4, just runs a bit faster. It just works really well. I mean, I've got a few SD cards there, various images of various machines, and I'm ashamed to say, I've actually not fired up my old TI-99 for a while now. I know exactly. I just use the emulator on because it's, and I know you could just plug a keyboard into a Pi 4, but there's something about the self-contained nature of the Pi 400 that really works well. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, go and get that tried out with Amiga. Get Sam Max on there or Monkey Island.
I've still got the original Sam Max box with the CD version because you had all the voices.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah. Oh well, go and get that fired up. Right, well, it was great to catch up with you this week, Richard. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, Gary can join as well with our pre-Christmas show. We haven't worked out what we're doing quite yet, but as long as we avoid Gary setting the quiz questions, we'll all be fine.
Exactly. We'll have no more very hard space questions that embarrass me, please.
Yes, okay. Right, well, Richard, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed, currently trying to build some very difficult Chinese Lego again.
Oh, well, I've seen some of your pictures. You're making progress.
It's really hard. I've not had to use glue yet, which is good, because that is like a red rag to a ball if you mention you use glue, but it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Right, well, I will follow you on there. I'm at iSticks on Twitter, and we'll see you next week.
Cheerio.